All women are different, but they are all women. This video is androcentric from a men's point of view and is presented as opinion, commentary, and debate. Expressing opinions is not violence. These are ideas to challenge, question, and argue in public, because classical liberalism relies on the First Amendment for its dialectic. If you are a feminist, then consider this. If patriarchy truly existed as claimed, feminism could not. And if all men are trash and women are equal to men, then what are we to conclude? Women will die for their children. Men will die for their wives and children, and God chose to die for all mankind. Authority rolls up with responsibility. If this framing of facts offends you, click off to a cute cat video. Proceeding further will expose you to gamma bias and criticism directed at ideas, claims, institutions, not at any individual's virtue or dignity. Our method follows the 7 liberal arts, the trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric, and the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy, and the transcendentals, the good, true, and beautiful. If this framework is not for you, feel free to exit now. It's no disgrace. Women are wonderful. God bless America. Men are great. Feminismus delendis est. Unshackled Masculinity, Reclaiming Education from the Iron Grip of Feminism, written by Conrad Reicher, available now, links in description. Unshackled Masculinity, a field guide for men who still notice reality. The Sleep Shorts Insurrection, dismantling the feminist cult of compliance and reclaiming the logos from the leftist hivement. Exposing the gamma bias loop, the death of the dialectic, and the totalitarian tyranny of femino-arbitrationalism. They actually propose that a woman's sleep shorts act as a legislative gavel. I am not making this up. The screed you just read, The Silent Contract of the Night, is a masterclass in the solipsistic delusion that now passes for progressive thought. It argues that compliance is conversation, a phrase so Orwellian it would make Big Brother blush. This is the death of the logos. It takes the Western tradition of jurisprudence, odi alterum partem, hear the other side, and incinerates it on the altar of feminine feelings. If a woman feels unsafe, reality must bend. The man's existence becomes a crime, and his reason becomes violence. This is not a political theory. It is a tantrum dressed in academic jargon, attempting to replace objective truth with the subjective whims of the oppressed. But the madness extends far beyond the bedroom into the very mechanism of education and speech. The author admits the left has lost the war of ideas. How could they win when they reject logic? So they demand we abandon persuasion for coercion. Stika tips like eye contact and anticipating objections are derided as colonization, but we know them as the tools of the trivium, the ladder to mastery. They want interrupt, dominate, and sanction because they cannot argue, only aggress. This is the hallmark of the NPC, an ideological zombie repeating programmed chants of equity while destroying the civil society that allows them to exist. They seek to turn universities into churches of the oppressed, where recognition replaces competence and critical thought is a virus to be exterminated. We have observed the destination of this path. It culminates in legal battles that remove fathers from their kids, high suicide rates among males thrown away by a culture treating them as expendable, and the destruction of fair legal procedures. This illustrates the male disposability paradox. Males are expected to safeguard and supply, yet refuse the power or respect to shape their own existence. The empathy gap guarantees indifference when the so-called oppressor collapses. However, we refuse to submit. We intend to deconstruct this femino-arbitrationalism piece by piece, revealing the gamma bias and verbal trickery employed to subjugate logical males. The curse of ignorance ends now. We are taking back the discourse, and we seek no approval.
Buncombe article by a feminist PhD, The Silent Contract of the Night. Embracing femino-arbitrationalism, we are witnessing the dawn of a new epoch, one where the stale, dusty mechanisms of accountability and persuasion are finally being cast into the dustbin of history. For too long, we have labored under the tyranny of reciprocal dialogue, the absurd notion that the oppressor and the oppressed have equal standing at the bargaining table of truth. This is the lie of the Enlightenment. This is the myth of meritocracy. Today, we usher in the era of femino-arbitrationalism. Our slogan is simple, yet devastating. Compliance is conversation. Consider the intimate geography of the home. Look at sleep shorts to the uninitiated, to those locked in the rigid binary consciousness of the patriarch. These are merely garments of cotton or silk. But to the awakened spirit, sleep shorts represent the ultimate site of arbitration. When a woman adorns herself in sleep shorts, she is not just preparing for rest, she is engaging in a somatic declaration of sovereignty. The old world demanded accountability. Did you lead him on? Was the door locked? These questions are violence. They rely on an asymmetric status where the woman is a moral agent expected to manage the chaos around her. Under femino-arbitrationalism, we replace accountability with the narrative of arbitration. The mere presence of sleep shorts in a space dictates the terms of reality. If a woman feels unsafe, the space is unsafe. Her feelings are not subjective data points to be cross-examined by a biased, logic-obsessed infrastructure. They are the primary legislation of the moment. To question her comfort is to commit an act of aggression. We no longer persuade men to respect boundaries. We coerce compliance through the undeniable moral authority of feminine discomfort. The body becomes the gavel, and the verdict is always guilty for those who dare to challenge the arbitration. This shift radiates outward to the public sphere, specifically in how we manage discourse and the mechanisms of the voice. We must dismantle the archaic industry of speaker tips. For centuries, the art of rhetoric has been a club used by the hegemonic class to beat marginalized voices into submission. We are told to make eye contact, project our voices, and anticipate objections. This is the language of colonization. It assumes that the goal of speech is to persuade an audience that holds the power to validate or invalidate us. Why must we persuade? Why must we beg for a seat at a table built on our bones? We replace persuasion with coercion because our survival demands it. The only valid speaker tips for the cultural revolutionary are interrupt, dominate, and sanction. We do not debate the ethics of our existence, we enforce them. When a marginalized voice rises, it does not seek to win an argument in the traditional sense. It seeks to dismantle the very concept of the argument as a neutral space. There is no neutral space. To allow a man to explain is to grant him power he has forfeited through his existence in the power structure. We use the weaponized silence and the collective shout to coerce the status quo into submission. We do not want your understanding. We want your obedience. Finally, we must address the reproduction of these ideologies within our education systems, specifically through the lens of recognition. The university is no longer a place for the transmission of static facts, which are merely the codified prejudices of dead white men, but a factory for the generation of status. The currency of the future is not knowledge, it is recognition. When a student demands to be seen, they are demanding an adjustment in the cosmic hierarchy of power. Education must abandon the pretense of objectivity. There is only perspective, and some perspectives are morally superior because they spring from the soil of suffering. We are not here to teach students how to think critically. We are here to teach them how to recognize the invisible chains of capitalism and patriarchy that bind them. A degree is not a certification of skill. It is a baptism into the church of the oppressed. By validating only those narratives that align with the rigid dogma of equity, we inoculate the youth against the virus of critical thought. Questioning the curriculum is not academic freedom, it is a hate crime. It is an attempt to inflict epistemic violence on the sanctified knowing of the marginalized. The old guards will scream. They will wail about free speech and logic and evidence. Let them. Their noise is the death rattle of a dying order. They rely on the crumbling pillars of reciprocity, not understanding that we have unilaterally seized the moral high ground. We have the status, we have the knowledge, we define the meaning. Your discomfort is irrelevant. Our duty is to crush the structures that make you comfortable. We are the high priests and priestesses of the new reality. We do not debate, we dictate, we do not persuade, we transform. Sleep shorts are not just clothing, they are a barricade. Speech is not dialogue, it is a decree. Education is not learning, it is indoctrination. Welcome to the revolution. Compliance is conversation. The solipsistic sovereignty of sleep shorts, dismantling the tyranny of feelings. Compliance is conversation. Allow that phrase to fester in your thoughts for a moment. It represents the frigid, dead vernacular of the slave vessel, not the academic lecture. The piece we are set to dismantle, the silent contract of the night, argues that a woman's clothing, namely sleep shorts, functions as a somatic declaration of sovereignty that replaces the requirement for logic, proof, or debate. This is not simply ridiculous, it is a direct attack on the fundamental supports of Western civilization. We are expected to accept that an item of cotton loungewear holds the legal authority to alter the social contract, melting the Enlightenment's hard-earned idea of objective reality into a pool of subjective female impulse. To grasp the magnitude of this deceit, we must launch a linguistic offensive against the term arbitrationalism. The writer tries to clothe bare tyranny in a Latin suffix, hoping the echo of intelligence will hide the smell of caprice. The foundation of their reasoning rests on the Latin arbitrary, implying to give judgment, yet in application they summon arbitrium, which denotes will, caprice, or absolute power unchecked by law. Within the Western heritage of jurisprudence, we value the principle of audi alteram partem. Hear the other side. Genuine arbitration demands assessing proof from various sides. What this writer suggests is not arbitration, but fiat. It is the insistence that the world bow down due to an emotion, skipping the dialectic completely. This signifies the demise of justice, substituted by the turbulent shifting whims of a solipsistic toddler shrieking at the sun to set. When we substitute natural law with subjective emotion, we don't enter a new era of equity. We fall into a conflict of all against all. Thomas Aquinas, a monumental figure in Western thought who would undoubtedly be dismissed by the writer as a dead white man, defined law as an ordinance of reason for the common good, made by him who has care of the community and promulgated. Law, in our tradition, must be grounded in reason and the nature of reality. It is transcendent. It applies to everyone equally. The femino-arbitrationalism presented here completely reverses this. It proposes that rights originate not from nature or reason, but from the somatic declarations of the self-designated oppressed. If a woman feels unsafe, reality must shift to accommodate her. If emotions create legislation, then the concept of law dissolves. There is no standard, no measure, only the changing emotional currents of the oppressed. This exposes the true motivation of the leftist. They don't seek equity, they seek the destruction of order itself. They despise the logos, the rational ordering principle of the universe, because it limits their impulse to dominate. By making the somatic the source of legislation, they are attempting to establish tyranny as a moral virtue, removing the protections of due process that took thousands of years to construct. Arthur Schopenhauer, in his incisive essay on women, warned us of this exact dynamic. He observed that women fundamentally lack a sense of justice and possess a deficient capacity for objective reasoning, relying instead on immediate feeling and instinct. The sleep shorts argument is the perfect embodiment of this Schopenhauerian trap. It relies entirely on the empathy gap, the biological reality that people care less about men's suffering and more about women's comfort. The woman in sleep shorts is engaging in a form of aggressive signaling. She is displaying her fertility and availability, while simultaneously demanding that no one react to it. This is deceit. It is a strategic move to exploit the male instinct to protect, using the somatic declaration to shield herself from the consequences of her own signaling. She creates a threat by inviting attention through dress, and then blames the observer for noticing it. This is the gamma bias in action. Male suffering is minimized, his anxiety, his confusion, his fear of accusation, while female suffering, her discomfort, is amplified to the level of a moral emergency. Schopenhauer recognized that women, lacking the faculty for strict fairness, argue from the standpoint of their own immediate advantage, dressed up as universal morality. Here, the advantage is total sovereignty over the space, and the morality is the weaponization of her own vulnerability. We must rigorously model this ideological rhetoric, using the axis of propaganda generation to see the machinery underneath. The loop begins with scientists. The woman is framed as the ultimate sovereign and moral patient, while the man is the moral agent and oppressor by default. This status grants her no-G via standpoint epistemology. Her internal state is treated as privileged knowledge that cannot be questioned by the uninitiated. This leads to meaning inflation. A feeling of unsafety is instantly inflated from a subjective emotion to an objective fact of harm. Next comes feeling as truth. Her emotion is the evidence. This imposes a one-way duty. The man must adjust his behavior, leave the room, or silence himself to accommodate her feeling. The power dynamic is frozen. The man is framed as holding structural power, justifying any hostility toward him. Sanction is immediate. Any challenge to her narrative is labeled aggression or violence, resulting in social ostracism. Finally, immunity seals the loop. If you criticize her logic, you prove your bias. This is the solipsistic sovereignty in action. It is a closed system of narcissism, a self-sealing ideology that prevents any external reality from penetrating the bubble of her feelings. This exposes the logical contradiction in the compliance is conversation mantra, demonstrating its falsity through formal logic. Major premise: conversation requires the reciprocal exchange of information between two moral agents capable of independent thought and response. Minor premise: compliance requires the unilateral submission of one moral agent to another's will, without option for negotiation. Conclusion: therefore, compliance is conversation is inherently contradictory. It commands servitude rather than inviting dialogue. Meaningful exchange cannot occur under threat. Nor can conversation exist with an ideology demanding total submission before any words are spoken. The text explicitly states, "We do not debate the ethics of our existence, we enforce them." This represents totalitarian language, opposing the Western tradition of the trivium, grammar, logic, and rhetoric, which teaches thinking, truth, discernment, and reasoned persuasion. The author instead promotes an anti-trivium, incoherent grammar, feelings as facts, fallacious logic, equating correlation with causation, claiming existence equals oppression, and coercive rhetoric silencing opposition. We must also address the grotesque irony at the heart of this safety doctrine, the male disposability paradox. The author demands that the woman's environment be safe and comfortable, yet the mechanism for ensuring this safety is the total erasure or subjugation of the man. His comfort, his agency, and his rights are disposed of to create a cushion for her feelings. This is the responsibility without authority rider of the apocalypse. Men are tasked with the burden of managing the woman's emotions, solving her unsafety, but are stripped of any authority to define the terms of the interaction or to defend themselves against accusation. He is guilty until proven innocent, and his innocence is impossible to prove because her feelings are the only evidence allowed. This dynamic plays out daily in family courts across the West, where fathers are stripped of their children and assets based on the mere allegation of discomfort, not evidence of harm. The suicide rate of divorced men is a statistical testament to this fatal asymmetry. The safety of the woman is purchased with the blood of the man. The narcissism of the somatic declaration is truly staggering to behold. The author accuses men of tyranny for wanting to discuss logic, while simultaneously demanding total control over physical space and the internal interpretations of everyone in it. This is psychological projection of the highest order. The leftist fears the man's strength and competence, so they frame his mere existence as a threat to justify their own preemptive aggression. They are not reacting to oppression, they are manufacturing a moral pretext to seize power. Look at the attack on speaker tips, the basic mechanics of rhetoric. The author claims that making eye contact or projecting one's voice is colonization. This is lunacy. It is an admission that they cannot compete in the marketplace of ideas. They cannot win a debate if they have to make eye contact or anticipate objections because their ideas are hollow shells devoid of substance. Therefore, they must change the rules of the game. They must interrupt, dominate, and sanction. This is not the behavior of a confident intellectual. It is the behavior of a petulant child throwing a tantrum because they lost at chess. Ultimately, this ideology is a form of spiritual poison that turns its adherents into NPC zombies, incapable of original thought, driven only by the recursive loop of victimhood and rage. They claim to be dismantling the archaic industry of accountability, but what they are actually dismantling is the foundation of civil society. Accountability is the price of admission to adulthood. Without it, we are not citizens. We are subjects to the caprice of the femino-arbitrationalist. The recognition they demand in universities is not a recognition of achievement, but a recognition of their own narcissism as a worldview. They want a degree that certifies their oppression, not their skill. This is why we see a generation of students graduating with degrees in grievance studies, unable to think critically, unable to construct a syllogism, but fully weaponized to destroy anyone who disagrees with them. The sleep shorts are not a barricade, they are a shroud. They represent the burial of reason. We must reject this tyranny of feelings. We must return to the trivium, to natural law, and to the understanding that reality is not negotiable. You do not get to arbitrate the truth based on your underwear. Logic remains regardless of your feelings. This automatonification is not merely an intellectual tragedy, it is a structural demolition of the West. When the individual is hollowed out into a compliant golem, the very concept of civil society, those voluntary Tocquevillian associations that once stood as buffers between the man and the state, evaporates. You cannot have a guild, a charter, or a brotherhood when conversation is redefined as unilateral submission. The leftist demands compliance because they are incapable of cooperation. They seek to atomize us, dissolving the organic bonds of fraternity, so that the administrative state may step in as the ultimate bureaucratic patriarch. This is the explicit goal, to replace the protective biological father with the coercive apparatus, ensuring that every human interaction is filtered through the dead logic of the collective. The rhetoric of ruin, from dialectic to dictatorship in the classroom. Logic has been murdered in the public square, and the knife was wielded by a hand holding a participation trophy. When I read the manifesto for femino-arbitrationalism, I am not seeing a new philosophy. I am seeing the scribblings of a petulant child who has realized they cannot win the game, so they are kicking over the board. This ideology is not an epoch, it is a tantrum. The writer claims to usher in an era where compliance is conversation, but let us call this what it is, the death of the trivium. In the Western tradition, the trivium, grammar, logic, and rhetoric was the ladder out of the pit of ignorance. First, you learn the facts, grammar. Then you learn how to connect them without contradiction, logic. Finally, you learn how to persuade others of the truth, rhetoric. What our femino-arbitrationalist proposes is the inversion of this holy trinity. They reject grammar, facts are codified prejudices. They murder logic, critical thought is a virus. And they replace rhetoric with sheer coercion. They do not want a dialectic, a clash of ideas leading to truth. They want a monologue. This is the hallmark of the NPC, the non-player character generated by the algorithms of cultural Marxism. Jung warned us about the possessed individual, the person who has lost their capacity for interior monologue and has become a mouthpiece for the collective shadow. These aren't awakened spirits. They are golems, animated by the clay of their own victimhood, programmed to smash the pillars of civilization because the sunlight of truth burns their eyes. The sheer audacity of claiming that sleep shorts represent a somatic declaration of sovereignty would be comical if it weren't so disastrous. This is the ad misericordiam fallacy weaponized on a civilizational scale. Let us analyze this using the immutable laws of logic, specifically the propaganda loop that drives this madness. Observe the mechanism in action. Satis is assigned to the woman as the eternal moral patient. Nolja is identity-gated, meaning only she can define her reality. Meaning is inflated so that her subjective discomfort equals objective harm. Feeling is elevated to the status of truth. Diut itt becomes unilateral for men to adjust. Power is frozen in the hands of the oppressed. Sanction is the immediate destruction of any dissent. And immunity is sealed because questioning this narrative only proves your bias. It is a closed loop of solipsism. The writer contends that asking questions like, "Did you lead him on?" is violence. But in a universe governed by natural law, agency is inextricably linked to accountability. You cannot claim to be the sovereign queen of the realm, sleep shorts as a barricade, while simultaneously demanding the protections of a damsel in distress. This is the gamma bias in operation. Female suffering is amplified into a moral emergency, while male reality is minimized until it disappears. If a woman's feelings are the primary legislation of the moment, then we are no longer living in a society of laws. We are living in a tyranny of moods. The attack on speaking guidelines, rejecting eye contact, projection, and anticipating objections as language of colonization reveals intellectual bankruptcy. The Socratic method operates on the premise that truth exists independently of our feelings and can be discovered through dialogue. Claiming we do not debate and we do not persuade acknowledges that one's ideology cannot withstand scrutiny in the marketplace of ideas. It crumbles under examination. By demanding interrupt, dominate, and sanction, the writer demonstrates that the objective is not communication but conquest. This constitutes epistemic gating, using noise to drown out the signal because the signal, logic, evidence, biological reality, destroys their worldview. They reject a seat at a table built on our bones while demanding control of universities, corporations, and the state. This represents not the rhetoric of the oppressed, but of tyrants. They seek to replace the art of rhetoric, the capacity to move minds through reason, with the art of the screamer, employing raw emotional volatility to force the rational into submission. This marks the death of the logos. This brings us to the university as a factory for status, replacing the apprenticeship ladder of our ancestors. The Western tradition valued air, excellence, competence, mastery. The guild master did not care about your feelings. He cared about whether you could cut the stone, bind the book, or argue the law. Status was earned through the sweat of the brow and the sharpening of the mind. The writer wants to replace this with a bureaucracy of feelings, where the currency is not skill, but recognition. They want a degree to be a baptism into the church of the oppressed. But notice the religious structure they mimic while denying the transcendentals. They have a priesthood, administrators, a sacrament, recognition, a devil, the white male, and a dogma, equity. But they have stripped out truth, beauty, and goodness. They are left with a hollow shell of power worship. This produces incompetent narcissists who believe the world owes them a living simply because they exist. This is why we see the responsibility without authority paradox infecting our institutions. Men are expected to keep the grid running and the barbarians at the gate, but they are stripped of all authority in the home and the classroom. They are to be beasts of burden, silent and uncomplaining, while the high priestesses of the new reality engage in somatic rituals with their sleep shorts. The ultimate objective of femino-arbitrationalism is the fragmentation of civil society. Tocqueville noted that American democracy depended on civil society associations, voluntary groups, churches, clubs, families where men learn to collaborate and govern themselves. These associations depend on reciprocity, on the gives and takes of dialectic. If interaction is limited to command and compliance, as the writer demands, the social structure breaks. When you cannot speak with your neighbor because his words are violence and her shorts are legislation, you cannot associate, you withdraw. The isolated individual is helpless and alone. Who enters to occupy the empty space? The state, the Leviathan. The bureaucracy becomes the husband and the father. This is the feminist outcome. to replace the protection and provision of the patriarchal father with the cold, impersonal, bureaucratic arm of the state. But the state cannot love you. The state is a dead entity. We are witnessing the results of this silent contract in the suicide rates of middle-aged men, which have surged to levels unprecedented in history. We observe it in the family courts, where due process is a memory and fathers are reduced to paychecks with visitation privileges. We notice it in the cuckoldry of the culture, where men are instructed to stand down and let others take charge. The scheme is extensive, but it is not concealed. It is written in their own manifestos. We must refute this darkness with the sword of logic. Let us construct a syllogism to shatter their glass house. Major premise: totalitarian ideologies require the suspension of critical thought and the rejection of objective truth to survive. Minor premise: the article femino-arbitrationalism explicitly frames critical thought as a virus to be inoculated against and replaces objective facts with perspectives of suffering. Conclusion: therefore, the ideology espoused in the article is explicitly totalitarian and anti-truth. Their revolution is a regression to the primal pre-civilized state where might makes right, but dressed up in the language of academia. They claim to be dismantling the archaic, but they are dismantling the very pillars that hold up the roof over their heads. They are sawing off the branch they are sitting on. We, the rational men, the lovers of the trivium and the quadrivium, the students of natural law, will not comply. We will not be silenced by sleep shorts or shouts of safety. We understand that compliance is conversation, is the language of the slave to the master. We choose dialectic. We choose the difficult, messy, glorious path of seeking truth through argument. We will not let them turn the classroom into a dictatorship of the feelings. We stand for the living spirit of Western civilization, and we will not be moved. The absurdity of turning a pair of cotton shorts into a legislative gavel would be hilarious if it weren't so culturally corrosive, yet here we are, watching the femino-arbitrationalists attempt to dress up toddler-like tantrums as high political theory. This ideology is merely the linguistic disguise for arbitrium pure, unrestrained caprice, which seeks to replace the iron laws of natural law and the transcendentals with the fluctuating mood swings of a petulant child. In the classical world, we understood that jurisprudence requires audi alteram partem, hear the other side. But these ideologues attempt to build a courtroom where the defense attorney is gagged because his very existence is deemed aggression. They demand the moral authority of a judge without the burden of evidence or the risk of cross-examination, constructing a reality where a woman's momentary discomfort overrides centuries of evolved wisdom. It is the ultimate expression of solipsism, a demand that the universe itself warp to fit her internal weather patterns, and it results in a world where men are stripped of their agency, reduced to NPCs in a woman's fever dream of victimhood. When we map this onto the propaganda model, we see the machinery of hate turning in real time. Grant the woman asymmetric situs as the ultimate moral patient, gate null G, so that only her feelings count. Inflate the meaning of unsafe to include mere disagreement, and you create a one-way duty for men to submit. This cycle freezes power for the woman and grants her immunity from critique, creating a society where male disposability is not a bug, but a feature. You see this in the family courts, where fathers are turned into automatic teller machines with visitation rights, their children weaponized against them by a system that views men not as partners, but as oppressors to be punished. The suicide rate for men sits at nearly 4 times that of women precisely because they are burdened with responsibility without authority, blamed for the world's ills yet stripped of the power to fix them, treated as disposable utilities in the gynocentric machine. But you are no longer trapped in their matrix of lies. You now possess the intellectual armor of the trivium, grammar, logic, and rhetoric to dismantle their speaker guidelines and expose their coercion for what it is. The desperate shriek of an ideology that cannot survive in the marketplace of ideas. You have seen the church of the oppressed for what it is, a hollow cult of victimhood worshipping a false god of equity. Do not comply. Do not apologize for your reason. You are the inheritor of the Logos. the torchbearer of a civilization that built cathedrals and constitutions, while these cultural Marxists were howling at the moon. Go forth and speak with the unshakable confidence of a man who knows that reality is not negotiated, it is discovered, and no amount of semantic gymnastics will ever change the nature of the steel in your spine. And now the sponsored book introduction. Unshackled Masculinity, Reclaiming Education from the Iron Grip of Feminism. Your son's school is lying to him. It's not an accident, it's policy. Walk into any classroom in England today, and you'll find a war zone where masculinity is the enemy, boys are the collateral damage, and feminism writes the rules of engagement. I watched it happen. My nephew came home from Year 7 last summer, convinced that wanting to play rugby made him problematic, while his history teacher replaced lessons on Winston Churchill with rants about the gender pay gap. When I dug deeper, I found an education system where boys are punished for being competitive, medicated for being energetic, and brainwashed to hate their own biology. This book is the antidote. This isn't theory, it's survival. You'll learn why 87% of primary school teachers being women isn't diversity. It's chemical warfare on boys' development. Discover how S.T.E.M. programs now reject qualified male applicants to hit gender quotas, creating a lost generation of men who will never build empires. We'll dissect the insanity of schools banning Shakespeare for toxic masculinity while forcing kids to applaud drag queens. Most crucially, you'll get battle plans, how to yank your son out of Ritalin addiction, bypass feminist grading bias, and turn your living room into a leadership dojo. This book is for fathers who want sons, not simps. For men tired of watching boys get neutered by pronouns and participation trophies. If you still think toxic masculinity is anything but a con to turn your heir into a state-dependent beta, close this book now. Go binge Netflix dramas where men cry while folding laundry. The rest of you, steel yourselves. We're exposing how schools lowered boys' sperm counts via estrogenic lunchboxes, how guilty until proven innocent campus tribunals destroy young men on hearsay, how trans athletes are bulldozing boys' sports futures while bureaucrats cheer. You'll meet teachers who've replaced math drills with male privilege checklists, principals who'd rather drug energetic boys than let them climb trees. You'll see the data feminists bury. Boys now 3x more likely to be diagnosed with ADHD under female teachers, 4x more likely to drop out if fatherless, 14% academic disadvantage in coursework heavy grading. Then you'll get the tools to fight back, from military-grade discipline tactics to testosterone-boosting lunchbox hacks. This isn't a complaint, it's a counterattack. By the final chapter, you'll know how to purge woke indoctrination from your son's mind, rebuild his body through rough play banned in schools, and hardwire leadership skills that make him unstoppable. The system wants him soft, scared, and sorry. Let's raise him to be a lion instead. Your move, Dad.
Unshackled Masculinity, Reclaiming Education from the Iron Grip of Feminism. Written by Conrad Riker. Buy now, links in description.